What was the worst of times with Van Halen?
Well, the worst thing that happened to Van Halen before the reunion, because the reunion was its own thing. That don't even register in any rock and roll story. It just was so bizarre. But the ending, our manager, my dear friend and mentor, Mr. Ed Leffler, who was my manager when I joined Van Halen, had been my manager through my whole career, 10 years. And one man dog. He managed Sammy Hagar, and when I joined Van Halen, he managed Van Halen until 1995, when he died of cancer. It was a horrible thing. And when he died, it's like the band just went pyong. Every vulture came at us. Every manager on the planet, every promoter, everybody went to Eddie, the guy who had never opened his mouth, who was not a leader in any way. I was the leader of that band. David Lee Roth was the leader of that band. They come to Eddie, you gonna let this guy run your band? Because I would say, F you, get out of here. You know what I mean? Hey, we ain't going with you. I'd tell the guys, hey, we're not gonna talk to those assholes. I know who those people are.
But they go to Eddie.
And they would go to Eddie and say, you gonna let this guy make it? You know what this guy said? He said it. And they just turned us against each other, and I got thrown out of the band. They got a new manager who came in through the back door. And he came in and poisoned the other guys. And as soon as I left and everything bombed and everything he had planned went in the toilet, they fired him. And it's just been chaotic ever since.
Been chaotic ever since. That included the reunion.
Yeah.
You said before it was a disaster.
It was the worst experience of my life.
Tell me about it.
Eddie was completely whacked out off the charts on alcohol and drugs, and poor guy, I mean, he was really in bad shape. I thought he was gonna die. Go on YouTube and listen to the '04 reunion song. You couldn't even recognize the song. There'd be nights where he'd start the song, and I'd look at Mike and look at Al, and we'd all be, look at the set list. Whew, that ain't the song, but it ain't nothing like it. I never heard it. And then he'd noodle around, and then finally he'd fall into the thing, and it'd kind of be like the song, and it was rough. And then I tried to quit after 40 shows. We had 80 shows. We did a contract, and I said, I can't do this anymore. The guy's gonna die, first of all. Every night it would be like, I'd sit in my dressing room and wait till I heard his guitar go, and then I'd look at Mike and go, he's up there. It was that kind of a deal. And so we went up and played, and it was horrible. He did horrible things to people. He treated people so bad. He was a complete raving maniac. I've never met a person like this in my life. Trying to bust windows out of a G5 airplane at 40,000 feet with a wine bottle, smashing wine flying all over the roof. It ain't even our plane. It's a rental plane. Kicking windshields out of cars, turning his hotel room upside down, wear the same clothes for 5 days, on stage, off stage, no shirt, just going around freezing cold, snowing outside. He's walking around with no shirt, bottle of wine in his hand, no teeth. I mean, it was horrible. I just don't know how he let himself go to that point. And when I tried to quit, there was an attorney that drew up a contract, I guess, that I signed that said I'd have to pay these guys off for all the money they would have lost, and yeah, so I stuck it out, and I haven't talked to the guy since, and I still really, really have a bad taste about what happened on that thing. And thank God he got himself together. He would not be alive another year. Well, I guess the next tour he went out on, he ended up in the hospital. But Eddie's a sweet human being. He's talented, and he's a sweet, wonderful heart guy. He's got some demons, and he's not the only person I know like that, but when I saw those demons take over him, it was pitiful, because when we got along good, he was one of the best friends I've ever had. Sad.
Always tough when you lose a friend.
It is. I never really had a lot of respect for Dave. I mean, he was a good front man of that style, but that wasn't anything I ever wanted to be. Growing up, when I'm gonna be a musician, I was looking at Stevie Winwood. I was looking at Eric Clapton. I was looking at Jimmy Page and Peter Townsend. Those are Mick Jagger was as close to being flamboyant as I could think about being. And those were my heroes, and a guy like Dave was never somebody that I'd say, oh, I want to be like that. And truthfully, Dave, what I found out later, was really into me in Montrose. I had that long mane of hair, and I went
This
up
is
there.
before you went to Van Halen.
Yeah, before Van Halen. The Van Halen guys were looking at Montrose like, we want to be like these guys, right? But he took a different turn. It's hard for me to remember, but when I walked into the room with Eddie, Alex, and Michael and Van Halen before that show, and I said, let's see what these guys got. You know, I didn't like that band necessarily. I said, well, I like Eddie's guitar playing. It's a genius, right? But I don't like their image. I don't want to be like that. So let's see what they want from me. Right. And when we just started playing music and I started singing, and they're looking at me like, whoa, you can hit that note? Yeah. Well, you can do this. You can. Eddie's going, wait a minute, whoa. Eddie goes over to the keyboard. Hey, what would you do to this? And we, you know, like, look, I'm getting goosebumps because it was so magic. It was like, whoa. And I'm looking at him going, you can play that keyboard like that? You know, well, let's write this song. And we were just like kids, and we just went nuts. And we just didn't even consider anything any of us had done previously.
Well, at that time, I'm taking you back in time. You're literally in the process of trying to decide to go with Van Halen. And you said it was a magic moment for you. You still get goosebumps over it. But at that time, what did you think of David Lee Roth?
To me, I wasn't buying it. There was something that was fake about him. I know the old Van Halen fans would, if I'd have said that in the beginning, would have crucified me. But he was the enemy. Eddie and they all hated Dave at that point. You know, he had quit the band, he left us high and dry, now Sammy's our hero, you know, and now in time, things have went all these, you know, like this twice, you know, I came in, he went again, and it's like, it's such a mess now that I feel confident in saying that. He was a showman, period.
That's what you thought.
Liberace was a great showman, but he could play piano, you know. He's in pretty good shape. He's got his little dance in his show, and he's got his rap. But, dude, this is Van Halen. This is music, real music. You know, Eddie, one of the greatest genius musicians in rock ever. And you're going to sing to that stuff, you should put a little something in there. I'm not jealous. I'm not, you know, dislike the guy. I don't like him. I don't dislike him. I was around him. He toured with me. We did the Sam and Dave tour, and we went out for a while.
Well, what's the best thing you can say about him?
That in his day, he was a great showman. Like, you know, the early Van Halen stuff, he really helped show Eddie to the world. Was his antics, he got attention. And then they went, who's that guitar player, you know? So let me say something good about those early songs were great. Lyrically even, as silly as Jump is, it's right on the money. When I heard that song on the radio, I went, damn, those guys did it again, you know. I joined Van Halen. We sell 42 million records. They have 5 #1 albums, you know, and tour the world as one of the biggest bands in the world. That is pure coincidence. And I was ready to retire.
I want to take you back a ways. You were considering retirement before you got the job with Eddie Van Halen. Tell me about how your love of automobiles, you have a deep and abiding love of cars, how that brought you together.
Looking back now, it's so funny how things happen. So I buy this Ferrari 512 Boxer, my first really big time Ferrari. So I buy it from this guy in LA who could get one. You couldn't get one, so I found this guy and I bought it. So when I went on tour, I gave it to him for the first tune-up. And I guess while I was gone, Van Halen had broke up and Eddie was kind of down and out. And he had Lamborghinis that he would take to this guy to get service too, because this guy was an ace mechanic. And Eddie's looking at my car. And he's going, wow, who's that? Whose car is that? That's a nice car. Is that for sale? And you go, no, that's Sammy Hagar's car. And Eddie goes, oh, because I'd met Eddie a couple of times. He was a fan of Montrose, my first band. And he's going, oh. And Claudio goes, oh, you should get him, you should get him into your band. He's a good guy. He's a good guy, you know. Eddie goes, you got his phone number? Yeah. Gives him his phone number. He goes in the guy's office and calls me. Now, I joined Van Halen. We sell 42 million records. They have 5 #1 albums, you know, and tour the world as one of the biggest bands in the world. That is pure coincidence. And I was ready to retire. I was leaving that tour. I just made a whole bunch of money, and I didn't know what I was going to do, but I said, I'm tired of working this hard. You know, since I was 26 years old, 24 years old in Montrose, 73, I worked every day of my life. I was either writing songs in the studio or recording songs or going on tour. That was it. I go right, you know, new album since '73, and then in '84, I'm going. That's enough. You know.